On December 19, 2004, in Belfast, two men dressed up as police officers knock on the door of Kevin McMullen, who's a supervisor at the Northern Bank. They tell him there's been a family accident. They say he needs to come with them right now to identify a body. But what Kevin doesn't know is that this is a trap. The moment he steps outside, a gun is pressed against the back of his head. Inside the house, his wife, Karen, is grabbed by her throat. Exactly 20 miles away, another Northern Bank employee, Chris Ward, had the same situation. His parents were held at gunpoint in their own living room. Neither Kevin nor Chris understands it yet, but over the next 24 hours, they are about to become pawns in one of the largest bank robberies in British history. The robbers knew everything about these two men. They knew their work schedule, their position at the bank, and most importantly, they know something that almost nobody else did. That the next morning, Chris and Kevin are scheduled to be the two key holders for the bank's secret vault. Throughout the night, the kidnappers continue explaining instructions while Chris and Kevin sit silently listening. The robbers knew details about the bank that only insiders should know. Security schedules, camera blind spots, vault procedures, and also the cash transportation routes, which showed whoever planned this operation had studied the bank for months. At around 2 a.m., after hours of instructions, the kidnappers finally allow Kevin and Chris to rest for a few hours. On Monday morning, Kevin and Chris walked into the bank. They smiled at their friends and served customers, all while knowing their families were being held at gunpoint. They had to call the robbers at specific times to prove everything was okay. At 4:30 p.m., Kevin told the rest of the staff there was a counting error and they needed to stay late. Once the other employees left and the bank became quiet, the first phase of the plan finally began. At exactly 5 p.m., Kevin and Chris walked down to the cash center in the basement where millions of pounds were stored in large stacks. Using their two keys together, they opened the main vault door. The robbers had given them a large sports bag and told them to fill it with 20 and 50-pound notes. The bag quickly filled with nearly £1 million in cash. Chris carried it through the empty bank lobby, walked out the front door, and headed toward a nearby bus stop. He left the bag there exactly as instructed before quietly walking back to the bank. A few minutes later, someone picked it up. What Chris didn't realize was that the first pickup was only a test. The robbers wanted to know if the police would appear or if Kevin and Chris had secretly warned someone inside the bank. When nothing happened, the gang knew the plan was working. That's when they gave the next instruction. Go back and get the rest. The second phase of the robbery was much bigger. The bank used large green boxes to move money around the building. Normally, these boxes had metal seals on them, but the robbers gave Kevin and Chris white plastic seals instead. Inside the bank, white seals usually meant the boxes were empty or only carrying trash paper. So when workers saw the boxes being moved, nobody thought they were actually full of money. Kevin then walked over to the security guard, a man named Billy, who was watching the cameras nearby. Kevin calmly told him that a trash collection van was coming and that he needed the back gates opened. Because Kevin was the manager, Billy trusted him and didn't ask any questions. A few moments later, Billy opened the gates and let a white van drive into the loading area behind the bank. For the next few minutes, Kevin and Chris worked as fast as they could. They moved 24 green boxes out of the vault and into the back of the van. Every box was filled with cash. In total, they loaded about £18.5 million into the van. The security guard watched the whole thing, but because of the white seals, he thought they were only moving empty boxes or trash paper. To him, it looked like a normal night at the bank. The van drove away, but the robbery still wasn't over. About 45 minutes later, the van came back again. This time, there were no more green boxes left to use. Kevin and Chris had to grab large black trash bags and fill them with as much money as possible. Most of it was used cash and different currencies like euros and US dollars. They worked quickly because they knew the longer they stayed, the higher the chance someone could notice something was wrong. In the end, they loaded another £5 million into the van. At one point, the security guard even helped move some of the bags, never realizing he was helping with one of the biggest bank robberies in British history. Once the van was completely full, the robbers finally told Kevin and Chris that the job was done. The men in the van warned Kevin and Chris not to contact the police right away. They needed enough time to disappear before anyone realized what had happened. Then the van drove off into the night. Now, all Kevin and Chris could do was wait. The robbers had promised that their families would be released after the job was done, but neither man knew if they could actually trust them. Minutes felt painfully slow inside the empty bank. Every passing second made them wonder if something had gone wrong. Then, about an hour later, word finally came through that the hostage family members had been released safely. Only then, at around 8 p.m., did Kevin and Chris finally raise the alarm. When the police arrived, they couldn't believe what had happened. £26.5 million was gone. At the time, it was the biggest bank robbery in British history. The news spread quickly across the country, and people were shocked that something this large could happen without anyone noticing. But the police didn't immediately feel sorry for Kevin and Chris. Instead, they started suspecting them. Investigators believed the robbery was too organized to happen without help from someone inside the bank. Kevin was arrested and questioned for a long time while police searched for evidence. Chris Ward was arrested later as well. Police searched their homes, their cars, and even their relatives' houses. They looked for hidden money, secret phone calls, or any connection to the robbers, but they found nothing. Kevin and Chris had no extra money, no secret payments, and no links to criminal gangs. They were simply two bank employees who had been forced to choose between protecting the bank or protecting their families. After months of investigation, the case against Kevin was dropped. Chris later went to trial, but he was found not guilty because there wasn't enough evidence against him. Northern Bank then made a very unusual decision. To stop the robbers from using the stolen money, the bank changed the design and colors of many of its banknotes. People across the country had a short amount of time to exchange their old notes for new ones. This made the stolen money much harder to spend without attracting attention. Even with all of that, most of the £26.5 million was never recovered. Some small amounts were found over the years in hidden bags and storage places, but most of the money simply disappeared. The Northern Bank robbery is still remembered today because of how simple the plan was. The robbers didn't break through walls, they didn't use explosives, and they didn't shoot their way into the bank. Instead, they used fear. They targeted two ordinary men and used their families to force them to open the vault from the inside. And almost 20 years later, most of the people behind the robbery have still never been caught. If you found this story interesting, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more.